Hello, and thank you for joining me. In this session, we're going to review several exercises that deal with logical operators. This first exercise is just to show us how logical operations are similar to arithmetic operations. So let's look at our directions. We're asked to write a procedure that carries out the mathematical and logical operations listed for each pair of arguments. So here we have our arguments, argument A and argument B, and we have multiple pairs of that. We're asked to carry out first our arithmetic operations, and then we're also asked to carry out our logical operations. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the code for that. Okay, the first thing you see is that we declare our variables, we list the worksheet that we're working on, and then we're actually going to start this out with the loop function. We're going to do a for next loop function because we're going through multiple pairs of data. So we go ahead and assign values to our variables, and now we're going to start stepping through the arithmetic operations. And notice the notation. This is how we actually perform mathematical operations with variables. So for instance, if we're adding them, we just put the plus sign between them. Subtraction, negative sign, multiplication or asterisk, and division, a backslash. Now we're moving on to our logical operators. So if you notice up here, our values are printing out up on the spreadsheet, and they're going to continue to print out on the spreadsheet. So whenever we want to take two values and perform an AND operation between them, we just simply put the AND operator between the two variables. Again, it's going to print out up here. Same thing with OR. So this is the notation for how we actually perform these logical operations between two values. Okay, we're going to move on to the next row. Now I'm just going to go ahead and step through this. So as you can see, we take our pairs of arguments, and whenever we run them through our different operations, both arithmetic and logical operations, we come out with different numerical values. Probably one of the best things you will get from this exercise is just the notation of how to perform these operations. So this is how we write it down in our code. Now that we understand how logical operations are carried out with numerical values, we want to see how they handle true-false values. So here what we have is an exercise that asks us to write a procedure that determines if argument A is greater than or equal to 5, and if argument B is less than or equal to 5. And we want to do this for each pair of arguments listed here. In addition to that, we want to take the outcome, which is going to be printed here, the true-false values, and we want to run those through logical operations, which will be printed out over here. So first we're going to run the conditions. Each argument compared to the condition, we're going to run it through the condition, and that's going to give us true and false data. And then we're going to take that true and false values, those results from the conditional statements, and we're going to run them through logical operations. So let me just pull up the code to show you what we're doing. Okay, as you can see here, I've declared my variables. I have arguments A and B listed. And I also have logical values for A and B because that's what's going to print out here in this section of the spreadsheet. So let me go ahead and just run through that. And as always, I just go ahead and list my worksheet and make sure that I'm working in the correct workbook. Now, if you notice, the next part of code is a loop function. That's because I'm going through multiple pairs of values. So let me go ahead and just start stepping through our code. Okay, so I'm beginning my for next loop. I go ahead and I assign values to the variables A and B based on the values listed here on the spreadsheet. And then I go ahead and I have conditional statements. And if you notice, the conditional statements are listed here, and the values are going to print out here. The logical values are going to print out up here. So for our first one, A equals 2 and B equals 9. When compared to 5, the respective conditions, we get our values, in this case false and false. And if you notice this next part, I have a variable that's designated logical value A and logical value B, which is going to pull these two values, A, logical value A here, and logical value B here. Now that I have values declared for these variables, I'm going to take them and run them through logical operations. So here I have logic val A and logic val B. So false, false. And I'm going to run them through the and, or, and equivalent. So it's going to go false and false, false or false, false equivalent false, and so on. So let me go ahead and just step through that. Okay, I'm going to do this for our next set of arguments. So now we have 6 and 7. Again, we have our conditional statements. Is A greater than or equal to 5? Is B less than or equal to 5? We see how it's printed out up here. True and false. I assign these values now to our logical variables that I've created, and then I run them through logical operations. I'm going to go ahead and just run this whole series. As you can see, each of our arguments, whenever they're ran through their conditional statements. A true or false value is given, and then those true or false data is run through logical operators. And this is what we end up with. So before, we were working with numerical data and running it through logical operations. Now we're strictly working with Boolean data, just true false values, and running that through our logical operations. All right, now that we understand how logical operations affect Boolean data, we want to take our logical operators and combine them with conditional statements. And that's what this exercise is going to allow us to do. So if you notice, we have a list of colors for argument A and a list of colors for argument B. And we're going to go through and we're going to step through each of these pairs of data. Next to them is a series of questions. Now, our directions tell us that, first off, the colors red, yellow, and blue are the only colors that are considered primary colors. So we want to create a procedure that walks through this list of colors and answers these questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the code for that. Okay, the first thing I have listed is the declaration of my variables. Now, since I'm using strings for my variables A and B, for my Boolean data, the answers to our question, I'm going to have those listed as is A primary, is B primary. So I'm going to assign true or false values to those variables. And again, I threw the standard, making sure I'm on the correct worksheet and working on the correct workbook. And I'm going to go through a for next loop function since I'm working through multiple sets of data. So the first thing I'm going to do is assign values to my variables. Okay, since I'm working with string data, I pull my value and then I just go ahead and change it to uppercase. That's what this UCase variable A does, is it just changes everything all capital letters. Something to keep in mind is that whenever we work with conditional statements, we have if, else if, or just else statements. We can now use an or operator to kind of take the place of that. So in this case, we ask if A is equal to red, or if A is equal to yellow, or if A is equal to blue, then A is a primary color. Else, it's just going to be not a primary color. It's going to be false. That statement will be false. Same thing for our variable B. Okay, now we actually want to address the questions. And the first one is either A or B a primary color? So we're going to look at those logical values that we just established. So we look at is A primary? We know that to be true. And is B primary? And that answer is false. Notice the or operator that we have listed in there. That's where we insert our logical operator in a conditional statement. So overall, we have our conditional statement, and this is where we have a logical operator. Is either one of them primary color? The answer is true. The next question we have, are A and B the same color? Now we're just looking at the actual values themselves. So we just want to know if they're equivalent. And the answer to that is no, they are not equivalent. The next question is, are both A and B primary colors? We're back to looking at our variables, A primary and B primary. That's Boolean data, true and false. And the answer to that is, I'm going to run it through. The answer is false because one is red, that's a primary, but the other one is green, that is not. So they are not both. And if you notice, we have the and logical operator in there. So is this variable true and is this variable true? They are not both true. All the values are not true, therefore the AND operation concludes that it is false, as we have listed up here. And the last question is, are A and B not the same color? So, or if they were equivalent, then we take the opposite of that. So in this case, A equals B is a false statement. The not operator takes that value and reverses it to make it true, because they are not the same color. Something to keep in mind, the not operator is a lot of times going to give you the same equivalent values if you use the not equal to. Notice these two brackets right here, the greater than and less sign put side by side. That is, are A and B not equal? That is not always the case that these two things are equivalent, but a lot of times they are. You'll have to take it on a case-by-case basis. So let's look at the next set of data. We are now looking at purple and gold, and neither one of them are primary. They're not the same color. The next one is we have yellow and blue. Both of those are primary. They are both primary, but they are not the same color. And the next one, we're going to have both the values are going to be red. So I'm going to go ahead and just run the code on through. So the most valuable thing you can get from this exercise is here we have a conditional statement. And if you notice, we have a logical operator included in there. Again, we have another conditional statement, and we have our logical operator, in this case, or. Down here, whenever we ask the question, are A and B both primary colors, we have our conditional statement, and within it is our logical operator. So this is how we combine logical operators with conditional statements. So the thing to keep in mind is that becoming proficient in using logical operators, and especially using them with conditional statements, will greatly expand the flexibility of your programming as well as increase the robustness of anything you create. So if you found this video useful, please click like and share with others. Thank you.